Welcome everyone to my introduction to Aristotle's Metaphysics, and I will be taking the word introduction literally, so it's a leading into the text. It's not an overview or a cheap 10-minute summary, but I will be trying to lead into this text, which has its name, apparently, received it from a librarian who placed the book, or this collection of books, behind the Ta Physika, behind the so-called physics, Ta Physika, the texts after the physics, which is where we get the name and also the thought path at the same time of metaphysics from. Perhaps there is something then of destiny in names as well. So what I'm going to be reading from is the Loeb Classics edition, which also has the Greek text. I'm just going to go into a few important passages and write the first one, of course, the first sentence. And before I begin, I would like to invite you all to leave a comment, share the video with anyone who's interested in Aristotle, ancient Greek philosophy, subscribe to the channel, but also, of course, because I'm a free scholar, which means that this is my work, that if you could contribute in any way to the channel, it would be highly appreciated. Thank you very much. So the first sentence in the translation is, "All men naturally desire to know. An indication of this is our esteem for the senses. For apart from their use, we esteem them for their own sake, and most of all the sense of sight." So here also the eye is privileged, has primacy over the other senses, aesthesion, as the Greek word is, where we get the word aesthetics from in modern parlance. And the first sentence is pantes anthropoi tu edenai oregontai physei. So physei, according to physis, according to how they arise, pantes anthropoi, all humans, tu edenai ogerontai, a desire, want to edenai. So they want to arrive at knowing, at that which is to know, to edenai. But note also that the edenai is close phonetically to the word eidos. And what we often find, also for example in Heraclitus, is in the Greek way of thinking, there is not this harsh distinction between that there's just a phonetic, say, similarity, and hence, but they're still distinguished. No, they can hear, I think, both, or to quote Osip Mandelstam, these words are bundles of rays. They are not, neat concepts, as we'd like to have. So there's a connection, a relationship between knowing and the eidos, the form of something, which will also later in the book, in book 7, be important when Aristotle asks what is substance, what is essence, etc., according to the so-called four causes. Now we continue with something which is often ignored. Here, Aristotle mentions something which is striking also on the very first page in this edition. There is a mention of memory, mnemi in Greek, or mneme, depending on how you pronounce the eta. So memory is they translate here, of course, as the faculty of memory, which I'm always a bit. I don't think it's accurate to speak of faculties in that sense, because it assumes a bag, as it were, of the soul, which contains certain faculties. But there is, because there is no word, at least as far as I can see, that would mean faculty here in Greek, but there is an opening up to a learning through memory. So a learning through memory. And here's something that's really important that comes here. So there are impressions on the animals and memories. That's what we share. But there is, in the human genos, in the human gathering, there is also kai techne kai logismos. So this is what distinguishes the human being, is art and so-called reasoning, or techne, of course, is technics, right? Is technology, and is at the same time also a being drawn into the realm of logos, which is by what? Through syllogismos, through the syllogism, there is more than just a memory in the human being, but a true recollection, a new inference in a new context of what was. And this is also very important. Often when the word essence is used in the English translation, or the word formal cause, and there's no explanation given by the translators why they do so, why they sometimes translate totien enai as either essence or formal cause, which should be, I think, quite different. So totien enai is translated by Paul Nathorp as das was war sein. And I will follow him here and say, in English, that which was, or that which has been, being. Enai as a verb. That which has been, to be. Totien enai. I'm not saying this is the definitive translation. There might be better ones, and if you have, if you are aware of one, or if you can provide one yourself, please feel free to comment. I'd like to hear them. Totien enai. Let's say that which has been, to be, is often translated as essence, but note that there is here a connection to that which was, to the has been, let's say the past, the having been, and that which still is, that which lingers on. Quite different from we would think, what we usually think of as essence. And this connects to the following in Greek. We are at 980b 27, I think, in book 1. Gignetai. Dek tes nimis emperia tois anthropois hai garpolaim nemai tu autu pragmatos mias emperias dynamin aputelusen. I'll focus on the first half. Gignetai, so arising from or becoming from, destined from memory, ectes nimis, emperia tois anthropois. Empiria, that's where you get the word empiricism from. The human being receives or acquire experience. So from memory, experience can be acquired. From a profound recollection. So experience is not immediate. It's related to the totien enai, to that which has been, to be. By the way, just as an aside, when David Hume says 2000 years later that the self is just a heap of impressions, and he wants to be a so-called empiricist, he cannot be an empiricist according to Aristotle, because it's the experience is not even formed. It's really just a heap of impressions, and it's so he does not have an account of experience. Just like analytical philosophy cannot have, because they are all based on this, a profound or any theory of action or experience either. So, memory and experience profoundly connected. The translation here is disturbing because they speak about producing an effect. So I'm not reading it. I'm just mentioning that this is a very disturbing translation, and I would be very, very, very cautious with the translations that you read, because they are very often all too modern, and all too concerned with solving a problem. Totien enai just becomes formal cause. So let's say something on the so-called four causes. So the invitation is that you must at least learn how to read ancient Greek when you want to read the ancients. No one has to be able to read ancient Greek and translate it along as you'd read in a different language, perhaps that's still spoken. That's not completely necessary. But what is necessary is to be able to see where the English or the German or the French or the Italian utterly deviates from the text. Because what we're doing is constantly destroying any access to these texts. So what I'm trying to do, and what I will do more, is to go into the Greek, show the limitations of the English, and also show you how to think in a different light, in a different way, which is hidden there in plain sight, but covered over by hundreds of years, hundreds, if not a millennium, of strange translations that misguide us. That aren't ours ultimately, because they're very often they're Latinized versions from the scholastics of the ancient Greek, and it spoke to them, but it doesn't necessarily still speak to us. So the so-called four causes are mentioned here in the third chapter of Metaphysics, the book 1. This is around 983a25, where he goes over and he mentions the physics. So that's where the so-called four causes are mentioned. By the way, the four ITI are, as he says there, there are, well, he doesn't use that word, but we can say there are momentary abstractions in the physics. That's how I read this passage in the physics, which are necessary to ground a thing, but at the same time, they're not just four, there might be intermediary steps, and they are not to be divided from one another. So there is not just arbitrary matter and arbitrary form and arbitrary, what are the four causes? Officially, they're formal, material, efficient, final. And what I used to do with students at university is to have them go over an example. Let's say a table. So material cause is timber. Then you have the formal cause, which is the shape of the desk. The efficient cause is the carpenter who makes the table, table maker, der Tischler. And the final cause, so-called the telos, is that which is its purpose to sit at and to work at. If it's a desk, if it's a kitchen table, of course, you would use it for something else. The word cause here causes problems, at least to our modern understanding or contemporary understanding of cause, because we understand cause purely in terms of cause and effect. We set a certain, and weirdly enough, we set a certain effect before and then spun up the dialectics behind it to get to that desired effect through an increase of so-called efficiency, volumenos, through a sheer act of will in our time. And we can now have become so abstracted that we can simply have any so-called matter, hule in Greek, or any, mashed together with almost any form, which is what happens in, say, genetics, and to produce a desired effect for a certain purpose, which is, however, divided also from the thing in question. Here, this is not the case. The formal cause is not a blueprint. Very often, as I said, the so-called formal cause, when it's translated as such, is totieneinai, is that which already has been and as such is, and is then shaped or gives the shape according to what it is. It is the timber itself that allows for a certain shape to come into presence and to ground a certain way of being with the human being in the world. A certain, we form a relationship with it according to this. So when we want to have the four causes, and once we have abstracted to this level of the four causes, against which Aristotle, I think, warns, even if silently, to just abstract than we are at the place where we are now, which is to assume that we can have any material cause meshed together with any form. But this is not the case here. And so this is my, let's say, a leading into the text of the Ta Physika. We are, in a sense, moving behind the Ta Physika. And what Aristotle is also doing is himself giving, recollecting how his way of thinking has been brought about from that which has been thought before. He goes through Thales, Anaxagoras, Anaximander, Parmenides, and Empedocles especially, and looks for the arche, the first principle, the first origin, and this is what he's encapsulating in the so-called four causes, or in the four ways of being indebted. But these, again, the formal cause is not a blueprint that can just be drawn up, say, abstractly a priori, but is already, in a sense, lingering. Is lingering and must be drawn out from, in order for there to be ousia, which is translated as substance. But ousia, of course, in this sense becomes substance, right? Something that substands. That's not the worst translation in that sense. But it isn't, as it were, already present as a substance. It's not just a substance that's given or granted. It is coming into, just as the hypokeimenon, the substrate, is not just underlying. There's no, I think, foundationalism in Aristotle in that sense. So this is my introduction, my leading into the Metaphysics, and the invitation is to allow yourself to be dislocated and disturbed when you read Greek texts, the foundations of us, because they are not just already understood, and they are not already clear. If they are, don't read them. Just go on Wikipedia, and which is what this machinery is, right? This is what it's about. It's about destroying this strangeness of this thinking. So I'll leave it at that for now. Again, as always, thank you very much. Share the video, and highly appreciate if you could contribute in any way. There are links down below in the description of the video to my work here. Thank you very much indeed.